The economy of this country is stuck in a vicious cycle. Just as in 2022 and 2023, the French economy got off to a weak start this year. The country's growth forecast has been slashed to a mere 0.7%, down from 2.5%, signaling a troubling trend. Despite this, experts predict a slight rebound in Q2, but the looming national debt, a staggering 100% of GDP, casts a dark shadow over France's economic prospects. Rising interest rates threaten to worsen this issue, potentially disrupting France's crucial foreign income streams. The million-dollar question looms large. Will France's economy experience a cyclical upswing this year, or will it drag the entire Eurozone down into crisis mode? France has been through the struggle lately. Think about it. They've dealt with COVID-19, supply shortages, crazy energy prices, the whole Ukraine situation, plus inflation and domestic issues. But despite all that, France is still a principal player on the global economic stage, clocking in at a whopping $2.63 trillion GDP in 2022, which has now surged to an impressive $3.13 trillion in 2024. That's some serious economic muscle, ranking 7th in the world and 3rd in Europe, right behind Germany and the UK. However, its economic struggles aren't just a recent hiccup. They've been simmering for quite some time now. And as for the root of the problem, well, it runs deeper than just a stagnant economy. To truly understand why France is in this predicament, we've got to take a closer look at how they've been managing their economic affairs. Now, France has always danced to the tune of capitalism, but with its unique flair. You see, there are essentially two schools of thought when it comes to capitalism: the social approach and the liberal approach. Historically, France has leaned towards a more socially inclined approach, with strong government involvement in economic affairs, but it has also adopted certain liberal policies over time. What does that mean in practice? It means they've been pretty hands-off when it comes to regulating the financial sector. Banks, financial institutions, they've been given the green light to innovate and operate with minimal interference. And who's been calling the shots? Consider the presidents from right-wing parties who led liberal policies. From Georges Pompidou in the 1970s to Nicolas Sarkozy in 2012. However, while France maintained a liberal stance, it wasn't until the 1980s that they started loosening the controls on financial regulation. And even then, it wasn't a full-on deregulation. The government was slow to crack down on financial innovation, often playing catch-up as new loopholes and risky practices emerged. So, what's the result of all this laissez-faire attitude? Well, the banks have been able to skirt regulations, generating significant profits while engaging in risky ventures. This approach has brought short-term gains, but also long-term vulnerabilities, contributing to the economic challenges France faces today. One big vulnerability is financial instability. By letting banks and financial institutions run with minimal oversight, France opened the door to all sorts of risky financial practices and speculative investments. This loose regulation also led to a pileup of private sector debt, which becomes a real headache during tough economic times. When these financial institutions are over-leveraged, it amplifies the impact of economic shocks, making the whole economy more fragile. Another long-term issue is misallocated resources. With financial institutions chasing quick wins, essential investments in long-term growth, like infrastructure, education, and innovation, got left behind. This short-sightedness has slowed productivity growth and made France less competitive on the global stage. Fast forward to the early 1990s, things got bad. And when we say bad, we mean bad. Even publications like The Economist, which were highly optimistic about France in the early 1990s, started to express serious concerns. In its March 11, 1991 issue, The Economist ran a profile titled, "What's Ailing France?" and the diagnosis was bleak. Consumers weren't buying, construction was sagging, investment was skidding, and the economy was slumping. The evidence was as clear as day. Consumer spending growth dropped from a solid 4% in 1985 to a measly 1.5% by 1991. Housing stats dropped from a 6-year high of 330,000 in 1988 to an estimated 275,000 in 1991. And as for capital spending, it took a nosedive from a healthy 10% in 1987 to less than 0.5% by 1991. And let's not forget about the gross national product. It went from a robust 3.8% growth in 1987 to a paltry 1.3% projected for 1991. As Businessweek bluntly put it, France's economic miracle suddenly seems a bit of a sham. Here is something you never knew. Alongside the sluggish GDP growth, France faced another blow as labor productivity growth took a plunge, hitting 0.5% in 2018, trailing far behind powerhouses like Germany and the US, with 1.5% and 3% respectively. That's like trying to race a snail against a Ferrari. No contest. So what's the deal? Well, it boils down to a sharp slowdown in both capital accumulation and technological progress, which is not exactly the recipe for economic success. But it gets even more interesting. France's export market share has been on a steady decline, and it's not just a small dip. We're talking about a rapid plummet. While other countries faced similar challenges with the rise of China and emerging markets, France's fall from grace has been more dramatic, especially when you compare it to the likes of Germany, as can be seen in this graph of stock of outward FDI. Companies packing up and moving shops, coupled with a surge in outward foreign direct investment, have only made matters worse, dragging down capital accumulation and labor productivity. To make ends meet, both companies and the public sector have been racking up debt faster than you can say budget deficit. Sure, record low interest rates in the euro area have made this borrowing spree seem like a walk in the park, but it's a ticking time bomb waiting to explode. And why do we say so? Why? Well, let us break it down for you. Sure, low interest rates make borrowing seem like a no-brainer, but if those rates suddenly shoot up, debt repayments could skyrocket, sending shockwaves through the economy. And if debt spirals out of control, we're talking financial crises, recessions, and austerity measures that could hit us like a ton of bricks. And let's not forget the good old days of currency manipulation before the euro came along. Back then, France could play the currency game to its advantage, but now, it's like trying to play chess with only pawns. Not exactly a winning strategy. With a strong euro and fierce competition from other Eurozone countries, France's economic playbook needs a serious update. But that's just scratching the surface of what's dragging France's economy down. Public spending has exploded from just 10% of GDP at the start of the 20th century to a jaw-dropping 57% in 2019, the highest among OECD countries. Talk about a spending spree. According to the IMF, the country spends about 24% of its GDP on social programs. That's 20% more than other advanced economies. We're talking about pensions that make retirees feel like royalty, unemployment benefits that cushion the fall, rent subsidies that keep roofs over heads, and family and child allowances that make raising a family a bit less daunting. On top of that, France spends around 8% of its GDP on a health sector that's practically fully socialized and nearly 6% on education, both more than its counterparts. Yet, despite this hefty investment, the outcomes don't quite match up. And let's not forget the elephant in the room: state-owned enterprises, which gobble up about 5% of GDP in budget support every year, 1.5 percentage points more than peer countries. Despite heavy taxation, France simply can't collect enough revenue to cover this massive public spending. The budget has been in deficit since 1974, and public debt has skyrocketed from 20% of GDP in 1980 to a whopping 100% in 2019. The numbers are enough to make your head spin. Businesses and workers feel the squeeze too, with the highest statutory corporate income tax rate in the OECD at about 35%, and employers' social contributions at the highest in the EU at around 12% of GDP. The tax burden is immense. This heavy load fuels capital outflows and unemployment, creating a vicious cycle of weak growth and rising debt. While France's generous welfare system and high public spending aim to provide social security, they're also straining the economy, making it tough for the country to keep pace with global giants. With such a spending spree, no wonder the economy book is in red ink. The shortage of labor is like a stubborn knot in France's economic fabric, and according to a European Commission report from July 2023, it's not going away anytime soon. With both high-skilled and low-skilled occupations feeling the squeeze, thanks to the creation of new jobs and retiring workers, The pressure is on. One potential solution staring us in the face is tapping into the migrant labor force. Not only could they help fill the gaps, but their contribution could also lead to net positive economic and fiscal gains. A win-win, right? Well, not so fast. Despite the obvious benefits, recent legislation in the French Parliament has thrown a wrench into the works. Imagine trying to solve a puzzle with one hand tied behind your back. That's the predicament we're facing. The bill, championed by Marine Le Pen's National Rally, managed to muscle its way through the lower house, spelling trouble for the employment of migrants to tackle labor shortages head-on. A tangled web of rules and regulations strangles free initiative and job creation. According to France's ranking in the 2019 Global Competitiveness Index, domestic competition is suffocated by burdensome taxes, subsidies, and sky-high entry barriers in the services sector. And as if that wasn't enough, hefty non-tariff barriers throw even more roadblocks in the way of foreign competition. But wait, there's more. Brace yourself for the heavyweight champion of labor market rigidity. Costly layoffs, formidable trade unions, and an eye-wateringly high minimum wage throw the pay-productivity ratio off balance. Is it any wonder, then, that the unemployment rate has stubbornly hovered around 8% since the global financial crisis? Meanwhile, across the pond in the United States and Germany, it's dropped below 4%. Talk about a stark contrast. French Finance Minister Bruno Le Maire has dropped some big news. France is bracing for an austerity budget in 2024. Austerity budget? What does that even mean? Don't worry, it's not all doom and gloom. There's a silver lining with a push for a greener future. Speaking to the media, Le Maire unveiled the budget's highlights. With tax hikes off the table for households, the budget aims to save $16 billion to shrink the deficit to 4.4% of economic output this year. Plus, a hefty $7 billion is earmarked for green transition and zero carbon emissions. That's quite a balancing act. However, Le Maire seems to be glossing over the downsides of austerity. Instead, he's emphasizing economic growth. This budget represents a notable effort and is the first step on the trajectory of an ambitious plan to restore our public finances. Ambitious indeed, but if France continues to grapple with rising borrowing costs and slowing growth, it might end up with one of the biggest budget deficits in Europe. And it's not just France feeling the heat. The entire Eurozone is likely to feel the impact of a global economic slowdown. The PMI index, put together by S&P Global Market Intelligence, is designed to gauge economic performance and business conditions. The Eurozone composite PMI has been on a downward slide for 27 straight months, dropping from all-time high of 60.2 in July 2021 and is hovering around 50.0 in 2024. Zooming in on France, on top of showing a similar downward trend, the country's PMI is consistently below the Eurozone's by 2 to 4 points since April 2023 to May 2024. But here's the silver lining. It is starting to see some rebound in 2024. Factory orders are down, but not as sharply, and some factories are starting to see a rebound in customer demand. Before we get into the last part of the video, make sure to check out the link in the description for our best recommendation when it comes to further expanding your knowledge on a more personal scale. Now, let's set the record straight. France isn't on the verge of collapse. It's in better shape than some of its European neighbors like Italy and Spain. But let's be real. Some long-standing issues need serious attention if France wants to keep its economy on track. Unemployment, labor market inefficiencies, and pension reforms are all big-ticket items that need addressing. It's like having a leaky roof. You can't just ignore it and hope for the best. Comprehensive strategies are essential to create jobs, fix fiscal deficits, and make sure pensions are sustainable. France is at a crucial juncture. The decisions made now could pave the way for a resilient and prosperous future. Imagine a France with a dynamic labor market, balanced budgets, and a robust pension system. It's not just a dream, but a real possibility with the right policies and reforms. So, here we are at the crossroads. Decisive actions today will ensure France continues to shine on the global economic stage tomorrow. It's an exciting time, and with the right moves, France can secure its place as a leading economic powerhouse. And as Murray N. Rothbard eloquently states in the book, man, economy, and state, with power and market. Without international trade and social cooperation, an isolated world would almost inevitably be marred by violence and perpetual war. If you enjoyed this deep dive into France's economy, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more intriguing economic stories from around the globe. And hey, if you're interested in more insights into the ever-evolving economic landscape around the world, you won't want to miss the video on the screen. Go ahead, give it a click, and let's dive deeper into the fascinating world of economics together.